So we have in the last session done the summary of the first four chapters of the essays on the Gita. Um, Today we will be doing the summary of the fifth, sixth, seventh, and hopefully a recap of the most important verses in the second chapter so that we can continue from there onward, right? Um, this chapter, Kurukshetra, and the next one, Man and the Battle of Life. Basically, the nature of existence and life as it is, as he says here, uh, what is the veil of ethical illusion, something like that. 1 minute. Ethical illusion. Yeah. So the dejection and discouragement felt by the human being when he is forced to face the spectacle of the universe as it really is, with the veil of the ethical illusion, the illusion of self-righteousness, torn from his eyes before a higher reconciliation with himself is effected. So, um, I mean, if you start with the first word itself, Kurukshetra, which is the title of this chapter. So the first verse of the Gita, Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta Yuyutsavaha, right? And the word Kurukshetra, obviously it refers to the battlefield, but there is another meaning which is given to the word. Kuru meaning to do. Uh, though Kuru is basically the imperative wala tense. Okay, ma Kuru means do not do, or Kuru means to do. Karma is the proper word for action, but Kurukshetra is also roughly translated as the field of action. So that is the central teaching of the Gita, that no matter what, the action should not stop. And the purpose of the Gita is to make our action divine, for which, of course, first of all, our consciousness has to be divine. If the consciousness is not divine, then the action cannot be divine. But that's how it begins. Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. Again, the word Kshetra is elaborated beautifully in the 13th chapter. This body is the Kshetra. This is the field of action. You can have several meanings. This is the field of action for the higher consciousness, right? So that way, all that. So, but basically, the idea is that it is a battlefield, and the chapter title for the first chapter, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. So, Vishada means depression. That is the closest English word. So, this dejection and discouragement, which is felt by almost everybody at some point in their life for whatever reason, that is the starting point for the yoga. That is how that depression or that vishada becomes a means of uniting our consciousness with the divine consciousness. So that is the significance of the chapter title itself. In other words, if such kind of extreme despair or dejection, etc., is coming to you, one can take it in this way, must understand that the truth in it, the reason why it is coming, it is also supposed to take us towards union with the divine. This is very important to remember, right? That is one. Second, what he's exactly saying here, that basically through the excuse of Arjuna, through the example of Arjuna, what then is it that makes the difficulty for the man who has to take the world as it is and act in it and yet would live within the spiritual life? Very important. We are not supposed to leave the world, right? Take the world as it is and act in it and yet live within the spiritual life. This is what the Gita teaches, कि sannyasa nahi karna hai, that inner detachment should be there, that tyaga should be there. And what is this aspect of existence which appalls his awakened mind and brings about? So till the time we have not awakened, right? Even the Life Divine, if we see the first paragraph of it, the earliest preoccupation of man in his awakened thoughts. So when that sattva has increased enough, when we have started thinking about what exactly life is, or started seeing existence for what it truly is, then we are appalled by it. What is it? All this struggle, battle, this is the nature of it. Why it is there? That causes, and is it necessary that for the sake of the furtherance of the truth or for the furtherance of the dharma, I must take sometimes stand against those whom I am supposed to love, etc., etc. All those, that dharma sankat and all. So this, I mean, through the human representative, that is Arjuna, this teaching is given that number one, this kind of despair, depression, this kind of even nervous breakdown which happens to a human being, this is the starting point for union with the divine. That itself becomes a yoga. And secondly, I mean, he's there in the middle of the battlefield and very proudly he says, "Take my chariot between the two armies, senayor ubhayor madhye ratham sthapaya me achyuta," right? But then, that whole aspect of life ki uske andar wo battle antarnihit hai, and whoever basically who does not want to fight, who does not want to become that warrior for the divine, and why that aspect of war is there, वो उसके लिए बहुत deep में जाना पड़ेगा, beginning from the inconscient and then how the evolution happens. First the negative things come out, then gradually higher things come out, etc etc. अमृत मंथन की स्टोरी में भी वही आता है कि first it is the poison that comes out and then in the last it is the amrita which comes out. But essentially life being what it is, struggle and the necessity of battling, fighting for the conquest of the good, for the conquest of the truth, it is necessary. No genuine seeker can shy himself away from it. It is not possible, right? Again, just to continue this thread, beach mein there are a few other points, but he says very, very beautifully and clearly that few religions have had this unflinching courage, right? Ye wala. Basically, what he says is that, when we see all hunky dory and good and all as if there is only a beneficent God, right? But then if we see the opposite side, if we see destruction, if we see massacre, if we see bloodshed happening, we are not able to see the divine working behind it. Some religions are not able to. And therein, he gives the example, both the masculine and feminine side, you do not adore God simply as Shiva, but also be able to feel that same God behind the Rudra aspect. And do not adore God simply as Durga, but also as Kali, right? And then he says this sentence, it is only a few religions which have had the courage to say without any reserve, like the Indian, that this enigmatic world power is one deity, one trinity, to lift up the image of the force that acts in the world in the figure not only of the beneficent Durga, but of the terrible Kali in her blood-stained dance of destruction. And to say, this too is the mother, this also know to be God. This too, if thou hast the strength, adore. And look at the last part. And it is significant that the religion which has had this unflinching honesty and tremendous courage has succeeded in creating a profound and widespread spirituality such as no other can parallel. For truth is the foundation of real spirituality and courage is its soul. This is one of the most important excerpts in this chapter, right? This is the reason why the Sanatana Dharma, the Hindu religion, has survived from so old despite all attacks, because it has had this unflinching courage and honesty to see God not only in the beneficent things, but even behind the destruction. Even now, we are in the, that US-Iran war is still going on. It is not ended like that. So, and this aspect, and again, several examples, मैंने last time भी session में बोला था, here and in the chapter, he says this very, war is the father of all things, said Heraclitus. And, many things, they get generated because of war. Internet, like I gave the example earlier, which we are using right now. How did the internet get created at first? It was started as a project of the US Department of Defense. It was called ARPANET. It was started in the late 60s. And the reason for it was the Cold War with the Soviets, right? So war is the father of all things. Second World War, if we see, uske baad jo, the world order completely changed. What Mother and Sri Aurobindo say, the birth of the new world, which they say happened in 1956. So for that, before that, two wars were necessary. The First World War and the Second World War, right? A giant dance of Shiva tore the past. This is the line that comes in Savitri. So war, the necessity of it is absolutely essential. Even, he says here, even our very bodily life, he says. ये example मैंने last time भी दिया था. Our very bodily life is a constant dying and being reborn. The body itself a beleaguered city attacked by assailing, protected by defending forces, whose business is to devour each other, etc., etc. Right? The eater eating is eaten. This phrase is there in this chapter. This is how, and ये मैं पढ़ देता हूँ, this is significant. So, okay, I'll just read this paragraph. Ancient thought accepted the starting point so far as it could see it by the scrutiny of the universe. What is this point? The reality of war and struggle. The old Upanishad saw it very clearly and phrased it with an uncompromising thoroughness, which will have nothing to do with any honeyed glosses or optimistic scuttlings of the truth. Look at the language. Hunger, that is death. Ashanaya mrityu. This phrase comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Okay. They said is the creator and master of this world, and they figured vital existence in the image of the horse of the sacrifice. Matter they described by a name, which means ordinarily food, annam. And they said, we call it food because it is devoured and it devours creatures. The eater eating is eaten. I think this is also there in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The eater eating is eaten. This is the formula of the material world, as the Darwinians rediscovered, etc. Modern science has only rephrased the old truths that had already been Darwin ka jo hai na, survival of the fittest, right? Modern science has only rephrased the old truths that had already been expressed in much more forcible, wide, and accurate formulas by the apothegm of Heraclitus. War is the father of all things, and the figures employed by the Upanishads. So basically, in life, this aspect is there. One cannot help it. And yeah, that's the challenge, that fighting this battle of life and fighting this whatever we need to do, maintaining behind all that the spiritual consciousness. This is what the Gita teaches. That how with that spiritual consciousness you can engage in the battle of life. The inner warrior who fights against all obscurity and falsehood. This is a phrase used by Sri Aurobindo in the Mother. The inner warrior who fights against all obscurity and falsehood. Of course, that is for one's own self-perfection. That book is for that. But it is, this is the inner war without escape. This line is there in Savitri. वो मुझे भी पूरा याद नहीं आ रहा है, but later on in the group maybe I can share that. So this is throughout it is there. And that is what is essentially covered in this chapter, that, this aspect of Kurukshetra, life being a battle, and again, he mentions, obviously, he gives the reference of the Zoroastrian religion, Ormuzd and Ahura Mazda, Ahriman, all those things. In India, Devasur Sangram that we talk about, it is there in the Puranas, it is there in the Vedas, all that. So it is there in all religions. It is there in all religions, the battle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. Even if we see the Mahabharata, so in the beginning, they tell that the Pandavas are the incarnations of these gods, right? So Arjuna is the incarnation of Indra. Nakul Sahadev are the incarnation of the Ashwins. Yudhishthira is the incarnation of Dharma. Bhima is the incarnation of Vayu. All these are cosmic gods, right? Similarly, for the Dhritarashtrians, Dhartarashtrians, they say that these are the incarnations of these particular asuras. The names are given in the beginning of the Mahabharata, right? So basically, that
Anil Bhai,
huh.
is the Kurukshetra a compilation? Do we understand? Because we see the challenges of matter. Is this more aligning up to saying that Kurukshetra is actually the three modes,
Kurukshetra is
which
basically
is
the
the
whole
three
of life.
gunas?
If you
It's
want
a
to understand,
compilation
it's
of
the
these
whole
three
of
modes
life.
of operation. Is that
You
what
have
it is?
no. You have to take your whole life as a Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra literally means the field of action. The field of action is life, and you have to take your whole life as a Kurukshetra. This is what it
Right.
means in the
But
context of
the
the Gita.
challenge is because if you see the challenge comes from the three modes of operations, right? The gunas.
Yeah.
If you see in life, you always come across people. Where is the challenge, right? It is the pain that you're caused by the tamasic or the rajasic, or it could be possibly the world state as well.
Hmm.
But it's only a compilation of these three, right? Till you don't look at
Yeah,
the spirit.
yes. So once you are gone beyond the gunas, once you are in the gunatita avastha, then you will not feel this aspect so much, because I mean see, that aspect will be felt of fighting and all. I would say predominantly when you're in the rajoguna, because that is that passion wala thing where you want to force things through. That friction will be felt. But even when you are in the higher consciousness, when you are established in the paraprakriti, in the gunatita avastha, still, because you have reached that state, but the world as it is continuing in the ignorance. So that struggle will be felt. You will be free from it, but it's not that you will not notice that the struggle is still going on and the battle is still going on. You will yourself operate from a free state. That is true, from an inner freedom. But yet, you have to put in your forces. If you have reached that level of spiritual power and all, you have to put in your forces and basically further the advance of the forces of the truth. This is what it is there in these books and letters of Sri Aurobindo and all these things.
Correct. Makes
Archana ji
sense.
has
Correct.
thank you, Archana ji. Those lines from Savitri to which I was referring. This all must conquer who would bring down God's peace. This hidden foe lodged in the human breast. The enemy of our progress. In the Gita, the enemy of our progress is distinctly called as desire towards the end of the third chapter. Vidhyenam eha vairinam. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhava, sorry, उसके बाद वो verses आते हैं. So man must overcome or miss his higher fate. This is the inner war without escape. So one has to fight that negativity, those retrograde forces which are taking us backward within oneself. Otherwise, one cannot move forward. So basically, that aspect of Kurukshetra in battle, it is there throughout, in the inner existence also, in the outer existence also. And one who is not willing to fight, he will just simply stagnate, and I don't know what will happen. He'll just basically sink into the tamoguna. So, and because spirituality ke saath, it's not that today only the idea is associated with peace and meditation and all that. Even in Arjuna's time, Sri Aurobindo says in this book that already the idea had started taking predominance, that this thing, spirituality, adhyatma, yoga, etc., it means taking sannyasa. That is why Arjuna says, let me take a flight to the forest. मुझे वहां जाने दो, मस्त बैठ के ध्यान करूंगा, and it is better to eat the food of beggary, getting which you get by begging, rather than to have these blood-stained enjoyments. So this idea had started coming even then. So it's very important, the kind of spirituality which follows that idea, it ends up in tamas. One of the reasons why India has declined and become so tamasic, we are better now. 100 years have gone since independence. We have become little more rajasic, but still, overall, if you see, we are a tamasic country. So the reason for that, one of the main reasons is Mayavad. This world is an illusion, nothing is there, just sit and meditate and seek your own moksha and mukti. That is one of the great reasons why India has declined in its vital energy so much.
So Anmol bhai,
All
can we
that the
say
Gita, 1 minute, all that the Gita corrects right at the beginning and with great force. You should never stop acting and you should never strive. We should not never stop striving for the divine victory in the world. Yes, Dhaval bhai.
So can we say that Buddhism
Hmm.
and
Yes.
Mayavadism has
Yes.
amplified this?
Yes. I'll
And
just complete the idea. I'll send a quotation later on. So Sri Aurobindo says that Gita had come as a gospel of divine works in the world, right? And before it could do its work fully, so basically it was its action was obstructed by the advent of Buddhism. And Buddhism is just the opposite. It's a monastic religion, right?
correct.
And Gita is, and exactly what happened, what is described in the first chapter of the Gita. Varna Sankara, confusion, all these things happened. It's there in volume 1. And, it was just complete opposite. And before that, there was no organized system of becoming monks. That was not there. People who were seeking that fourth ashrama, sannyasa, they were doing it. Yajnavalkya did it. Yajnavalkya, who writes the Ishopanishad and all that, at the end of his life, they say that he wandered about like a sannyasi, right? But it was an individual choice. Like this, in an organized way, and making the cream of the society monks and therefore leaving the society helpless and powerless, that was not there. That came with the advent of Buddhism. And that led to, gradually, it led to the decline of the vital energy. And then what displaced Buddhism in India, that is Shankaracharya. So basically, he replaced the zero by the one, the Shunya by the Brahman. Right? That's a big thing, because Buddhism is totally pessimistic. वो तो किसी को मानते ही नहीं है. They think that you come from the zero and go back to the zero. Essentially, Buddhism का अगर बोले, what I have read in the letters of Sri Aurobindo, according to Buddhism, you are nothing but a bundle of samskaras. And once that bundle of samskaras is loosened and that you are free from samskaras, you go back to that original Shunya from which you came. At least that is one of the dominant threads in Buddhism, right? So what Shankara did was he replaced that Shunya by the one, by the Brahman. But yeah, and Sri Aurobindo says कि he kind of completed Buddha's work in the way कि उसको और वो पक्का हो गया. But that Mayavad and all that, उसका reason भी Sri Aurobindo ने बताया. Because they did not reach the supermind, it is because the spiritual effort of India, it reached only till the overmind level. That is why the spiritual effort of India culminated in Maya. This is what Sri Aurobindo says.
He also says this, na, ki because the yoga. Sorry.
Multiple voice. Arora ji? Nahin. He's talking to somebody else. Dhaval bhai?
What I was saying is कि that means कि Shankaracharya also, I mean, he was a great person in that sense, but because of Mayavad, वो amplification और बढ़ गया, इसीलिए हम बोलते हैं ना,
amplification increased further. And because it was expressed in such a sharp, logical and rational way, and he defeated all the Buddhists and all the others with whom he argued, it became established. And that is the dominant philosophy. Even today, it is the dominant this thing. And the
हाँ
moment you start taking up spiritual life, the next thing anybody will say is, हाँ ये तो मोह माया से free हो गया. And ये तो world सब मिथ्या है, मोह है,
correct
माया है. And there is no meaning in this world. This world itself is an illusion. The world itself is falsehood. All those things start coming.
correct
What
correct
about Vasudeva Sarvam Iti? The Gita explicitly says Vasudeva Sarvam Iti. All is Vasudeva. If all is Vasudeva, then the world is also Vasudeva. Upanishad says Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma 3.14.1. What about that? So all that,
correct
and it's not that Shankara was not opposed. Shankara was opposed only 200 years later by Ramanuja. And then somebody else, Madhva, came. He gave some other philosophy. Then Chaitanya came. The Vaishnavas don't believe in that. The Vaishnavas don't believe in that kind of, Mokshavad vagara. They believe in the Vaikuntavad. They want to go
हाँ
to Golok and all.
हाँ
But essentially, their idea is also that this world cannot be redeemed. This world cannot be redeemed. And the redemption can be had only in some higher world or in
वैकुंठ लोक
Moksha. That
correct
is what
correct
ultimately the philosophy led to. And uska reason was, it's very significant. I quoted it earlier. I'm again saying it is because they did not go beyond the overmind. Overmind is still not the complete truth. The complete truth lies in the supermind. Why Sri Aurobindo has been able to give this knowledge? It is because he attained that complete truth and he was writing from that plane. That is why he was having that complete view. And that is
and
why he's able to see the role of everything which has happened in the evolution. And what, again, that sentence, what is the intention of the creator behind the creation of the material universe? Is he an idiot? He has just created it just so that we can come back. It does not
नहीं नहीं
sound
नहीं
very. If it is
लाइफ
a
डिवाइन में
wisdom,
हाँ
and especially if that wisdom is having power, then
हाँ
what is the reason? What is the intention behind the
correct
creation of the material
correct
universe?
correct also he says right because the yogis could not transform the physical at that level that
Yeah,
is why mayavad became a
yeah,
sharp turn because
yes,
अब हम इसको ट्रांसफॉर्म नहीं कर सकते तो इसको छोड़ ही देते हैं लाइक
exactly,
गिव अप कर देते हैं इसको चलो अभी ये वैलिडेट नहीं हो रहा
exactly,
नहीं हो रहा तो
exactly,
श्री अरबिंदो राइट्स दिस इन सिंथेसिस आई थिंक कि इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि इसमें से भाग जाओ आप
exactly. Exactly.
Anmol
And
bhai,
again, Dhaval bhai has quoted that. May I just read it? It's छोटा सा ही है, ज़्यादा बड़ा नहीं है. या फिर I've already told it, so maybe I'll just paste it on the chat from this here. हाँ, बोलिए, योगेश जी.
yeah, Anmol bhai, this highlights something very, very important, that the power of the psychic being to choose. If for generations people have come and achieved the overmind and they have not aspired for the supermind, that shows that even the Lord, even if they come into that spiritual existence, they discover the overmind, but because their psychic being does not choose the supermind, they get stuck there.
I'll,
So
I'll
if you listen to this, it makes you realize the power of the psychic being, that till you don't choose, and therefore even
till
right
that
at the
complete surrender to the divine is there, and that
correct.
surrender comes because of the psychic being. I'll say something, it's important since I mentioned it. Sri Aurobindo himself says that, when the overmind lusters were descending on him, and he says he does not know of not even a single case that when it is so luminous, he says, that when those overmind lusters are descending upon you, he does not know of a single case who has not thought that this was the complete light. हर किसी को यही लगता है कि यही लास्ट एंड फाइनल है बिकॉज इट इज सो ल्यूमिनस बट बिकॉज ही वाज हिज गाइड वाज कृष्णा एंड हिज टोटल सरेंडर had happened from the time of Lele, when he sat and just let Lele basically make his mind silent, and the universal Shakti, both the mother and Sri Aurobindo, the chief component of their sadhana, after a certain point of maturity, is total surrender to the divine will. And it is that divine will, Sri Aurobindo says, which through all the vagaries, all the ups and downs, all the क्या बोलना चाहिए उसको vicissitudes of a very very intense and arduous sadhana, it made him reach the supermind, and from there he could get the complete knowledge and write all these great books and explain things in their totality. So the earlier people, they cannot be matlab, found matlab, and again, if you understand what avatarhood is, there are 3 chapters in this. And if Sri Aurobindo is a supramental avatar, all this knowledge about supramental and avatar, all this about completeness and mayavad nahi hona chahiye वगैरह, it could only be given by the avatar of the supermind. And the time for that had not come till 1872. So, this all has to be seen in a perspective. It's not that
correct
Buddhism is wrong. It's not that Shankara is wrong. It's just that वो एक evolution पूरा चलता आ रहा है. And at those points in the history, it is, मतलब उनका वो वाला role था. They played a certain role, but it was not complete. So if I am saying that Buddhism obstructed the action of the Gita, it's not that it is something negative. Buddhism made a great contribution. So if you reach that total freedom, it is part of the spiritual development. But yes, I mean, there are conflicting energies. Like there are universal forces at play. वो होता है. It's like
In
difficult
that
to
sense,
describe it.
in that
No,
sense,
Anmol bhai, the
Buddhism was a
reason I
helper
brought
and
this up,
Buddhism is a bar, है ना?
Sorry?
क्योंकि Buddhism was a helper to break the rituals.
Buddhism was a helper in many ways, like mainly जो कर्म कांड वगैरह set in
Karma
किया
Kand,
था,
correct.
and the kuritis which had come. So to
हाँ,
remove them from the Vedic dharma, Buddhism's advent
was
was
a helper,
essential,
but
right?
it became a bar when
It
it
became a
introduced.
bar. See, number one, the main thing which happened with Nastika बोलते हैं उसको, it was a revolt against the
हाँ,
authority of the Vedas. Okay. Now, even in the Veda, the full knowledge is there, though in a very symbolic form. So, if in your revolt you are going to completely reject all that knowledge, then your base is gone.
That
Your
is why
this thing
Swami
is gone.
Vivekananda, हाँ, इसलिए स्वामी विवेकानंद
Yes.
बोलते हैं उनकी बुक में
Yes.
Buddhism is a rebel child of
Yeah,
Hinduism.
exactly. It is
Hinduism
the
was,
first Protestant religion of the world.
हाँ,
It is the first Protestant religion of the world. बाकी सब तो बाद में आए हैं. And it is the first organized religion of the world.
and Jainism is following its line, no? It's
नहीं, वो
similar.
जैनिज्म इंडिपेंडेंट था, but their मतलब their originators were
अच्छा.
जैनिज्म का हिस्ट्री मुझे इतना मालूम नहीं है. वो
It's
अलग
also
है.
atheistic, ना? But it is also
हाँ, but
atheistic.
they are Gnostic. They are Gnostic. They don't believe in the authority of the Vedas.
हाँ,
Neither the
Anmol
Jains
bhai,
nor the Buddhists. They both of them don't believe.
okay.
yeah, the
उसमें
point
भी
I
there are
was trying,
several things. Like if I say they are not connected to Vedas and all, देखिए, Sri Aurobindo like the one में बोलते हैं, Buddhism which is regarded as an unvedic doctrine. Regarded, माने it is not. See, anything in India, first things one should understand, anything in India, the base of this civilization, of this dharma culture is the Veda. Everything is springing from the Veda, no matter what it is. Okay, if you disown your father, it does not mean that he is not your father. So Veda is the father of everything. Let that be absolutely clear. बुद्धिज्म में भी जो असत का कॉन्सेप्ट है, दैट नॉन एग्जिस्टेंस का एटसेट्रा, इट इज देयर इन द उपनिषद. You read the
yes.
Chandogya Upanishad, the concept of asat is there. So, you are saying I am not taking from there. That does not mean anything. It is already there. Right? So, things need to be seen in their totality. Yogesh bhai were saying something.
yeah, Anmol bhai, the point I was trying to highlight is that anybody would assume that when the illumination that you described, that Sri Aurobindo says, comes when you achieve the overmind, you would assume that after you've come to the overmind, that understanding would dawn on you that you have to still aspire more to be to the supermind and be the man of action,
Yes, correct.
and not what Buddhism
Correct.
or Jainism talks
Correct.
about.
Correct.
Why does it stop there? The fundamental point is that at that level of evolution also, till you do not choose, and that is the power of the human existence, that the psychic being is the power of experience.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you do not choose at that to go for the divine,
Psychic being is that entity in
not
you which
choose.
enables you to surrender to the divine.
Correct.
So
But
the
that
mother
choice
says
has
that
to be
even the
made by the
gods, for
psychic, right?
example, because the gods don't have a psychic being as such. Okay. The gods are emanations of the supreme, but they don't contain the supreme within themselves like a human being does in that form of that psychic being. Therefore, even the gods do not have the concept of surrender or total surrender to the will of the supreme. It is only there because of the psychic being in the human being. So even if the
Right.
gods have to experience complete surrender, I will post a quotation regarding Durga and how she experienced this complete surrender. See, these are all again fantastic and revolutionary sort of things which we read in the literature of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. So we should be open-minded about them. Right? मतलब वो ट्रेडिशनल उससे अगर दुर्गा के बारे में ऐसे कैसे उससे काम नहीं चलेगा. You have to understand, and the mother is revealing from a very high vision like that. So
Correct.
yeah.
So you need this. So this is my point, because otherwise, in a path of evolution, one would feel that after this illumination, after achieving the overmind, there would be a natural progression to the supermind. But it stops there, as we can see in Jainism,
It can
Buddhism.
be a partially intermediary fulfillment at some level. Okay. Let's say you follow Vaishnavism and you reach the Vaikuntha. That is a world in the overmind. And you are there for some time. You feel Salokya Mukti. You feel Samipya Mukti. Fine. But you never know. Maybe I don't know what the beings there are thinking or doing. But it is possible for you to be there only for some time, come back again and pursue your further evolution. Why not? This is what Sri Aurobindo has said in a letter, that it can be a partial or intermediary fulfillment, but the evolution can go forward if it is the destiny of the soul. Again, destiny word, I mean, it's not like कि ये पहले से decided है कि ऐसा ही होगा. It's not like that. That choice is there. And anyway, for anybody who is on this group, who has been exposed to the teaching of Sri Aurobindo, once again, I am repeating that sentence. What is the intention behind the creation of this material universe? All other yogas, they do not regard any intention.
Absolutely.
What is the intention? Is divine a fool? Is he an idiot that he has created this world just so that we can come out of it and say, yeah, we are free? Doesn't make any sense.
Right. Cessation, birth by cessation of birth.
Exactly. That is what Sri Aurobindo poo-poos in
Life
one of the
Divine.
chapters of the Life Divine.
Life
That the
Divine, yeah.
purpose of birth is the cessation of birth. Does it make any sense? The freedom has to be from ignorance. The mukti has to be from ignorance. Soham asmi. I know this, I am free. And then I do what the divine will wants me to do. The mukti that should be sought for is the mukti from ignorance. And how does Sri Aurobindo define ignorance? At least in the Isha Upanishad. Ignorance is defined as the consciousness wherein you lose the sense of oneness. Avidya. The consciousness of unity is lost. That is ignorance. So,
but when they come to that spiritual power of what a Buddha realized, they experience oneness, but they do not aspire for the final step, which is...
Again, right now, what Buddha is aspiring for, we don't know because a lot of time has gone by. But he was in contact with the mother. There is a prayer of the mother in which mother gets a communication from Shakya Muni, 5:30 p.m. in the evening. Even the time is noted, date is noted. It's a proper communication. So we never know. But yeah, essentially what you're saying is right. That at that time, they did not have that idea of the supermind. And Earth was not ready for all this. Exactly. When the readiness in the Earth comes, then the avatar comes and then he gives this knowledge. Before that, it's very practical. Avatarhood wala jo book hai, I'll maybe just paste the PDF on the group. Just read that. It's fantastic how he reveals that, why the divine comes as a vibhuti at certain times, why as an avatar, what knowledge is revealed at what point. All that is there in that book.
Please paste that.
I'll do.
And also this, which Mother's agenda has this one, which you mentioned, gods are emanations but do not carry.
Yes. All agenda.
I'll
paste that. I'll go through the recording and I'll paste
Okay. Thank you. Right? Thank you so much. Yeah.
8:36. Shall I go to the whatever summary of the next chapter now?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
I have a small point to submit.
Boliye, Arora ji.
Without even referring to Sri Aurobindo and the mother,
yes,
all our scriptures they very clearly state that the karma, that the human is the only karma yoni.
Yes.
Rest
all bhoga yoni hai.
Rest all are bhog yoni.
Correct.
And even the gods, they aspire to take the birth as a human being.
Correct.
That obviously means the action is here, not
exactly. Exactly. The progress can be made here. Those are what are called typal worlds. That is the terminology used by Sri Aurobindo. So the higher worlds, the stations of the gods and all these lokas, typal hain. So you are fixed there in a type, right? So you become a devata and puja is offered to you and you enjoy that puja and you give blessings and you exercise your power in the cosmic forces. That's about it. But by yourself, you don't grow. So if you want to grow and evolve to a higher and higher level of consciousness, then the place for that is the earth. And exactly, वो विष्णु पुराण के अंदर भी एक है कि and the devas are looking for birth in India, उसमें आता है. Yeah. Okay, next one. Man and the Battle of Life. So here, I mean, last para we will read. I have seen that is significant to read. One thing he says here is that, even at that time, leave about today, but especially even in those times, the Gita was composed at a time when war was even more necessary than it is today. This is the sentence. We must remember that the Gita was composed at a time when war was even more than it is now, a necessary part of human activity, and the idea of its elimination from the scheme of life would have been an absolute chimera. That necessity of Varna. In those times, what he's saying is that the human consciousness as a whole was even less evolved than what it is currently. The crudeness, the fighting tendency and all that was still there. And if you basically just surrender to whoever is in power and, don't oppose it, then they will take the evolution backward by thousands of years. So it has to be opposed. We know in Sri Aurobindo's own lifetime how he opposed the work of Hitler. And he said that, if this is not opposed, this will take the evolution back by at least 2,000 to 3,000 years. This is the exact comment of Sri Aurobindo, right? Again, one of the important points in this chapter is what he says, that Kshatriya aspect, that Varna thing. So it serves as a natural means of self-development, and that engaging in battle, that itself ennobilizes your nature. It makes it more noble when it is done for the sake of dharma, right? So the word Arya, so sometimes used for Kshatriya synonymously, but it means nobility basically. And fighting in a righteous war for the protection of society, etc., it's a natural means of self-development. It helps to ennobilize your nature. But that part is restricted only to a certain part of the society. He gives the example, he kind of, sort of jokingly says that what has happened in Europe is that even the priest, he's writing during the First World War. This book is written basically from 1916 to 1920, right? This chapter is written somewhere in 1916. So First World War is going on. So he says in Europe what has happened is that even the priest who till yesterday was giving the sermon of religion and all, tomorrow he is having to go and fight on the battlefield because itna zyada uske andar confusion ho gaya. And all those things are there. So essentially, even that fighting, it is helpful as a means of self-development. ये एक sentence है यहाँ पे इसमें, natural means.
But not when it is done out of ego, no?
Not when it is done out of ego, when it is done out of a sense of duty, out of a sense of dharma. See, because not all are Kshatriyas. 5-10% are Kshatriya, and it is their designated duty to fight. But what happens when, they make misuse of their position or power? They use their weapon, or look, for example, like the soldiers who are having the weapons today.
Correct.
If they are given, free life, then they start shooting.
Correct.
Madness. अमेरिका में जो होता है आपको weapons, इंडिया में आर्म्स एक्ट आया था, उसका अगेन basically the British brought that to weaken us. That arms act was basically brought, so हमको disarm कर दो, किसी के पास कोई weapon नहीं रहेगा. So that may not be such a wise thing, currently when all that is not
जो
necessary.
हम अपनी डेली लाइफ में भी अनमोल भाई ये देखते हैं कि सो जस्ट जनरल एग्जांपल, एकदम प्रैक्टिकल एग्जांपल लूं इसका, तो मान लीजिए आप कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी में रहते हैं जहाँ चेयरमैन, सेक्रेटरी और ट्रेजरर वगैरह रहते हैं, और वो लोग ओहदे का फायदा उठाते हैं, बट यूएस पर्सन आर सीइंग, but then you feel it that you are being exploited, your money is being used, now you have to shout and fight.
Yes, so this is that part over here. Indian civilization, on the contrary, made it its chief aim to minimize the incidents and disaster of war. Acha, one should not think that Gita is preaching war. No. Ultimately, what we want is peace, and we want harmony, and we want unity and oneness and all that. But you have to take things as they are, not as they will be in a distant future. If India had not done its nuclear test and all during 1998 and all, तो एक खा जाते लोग हमको. We would be, at their mercy, at the mercy of the US or some greater power. So one has to be practical. यहाँ वो गांधीवाद, अहिंसावाद नहीं चलने वाला.
Correct.
Yeah, very important.
Very important. Yeah.
Indian civilization, on the contrary, made it its chief aim to minimize the incidents and disaster of war. For this purpose, it limited the military obligation to the small class who, by their birth, nature, and traditions, were marked out for this function and found in it their natural means of self-development. See, through the flowering of the soul in the qualities of courage, disciplined force, strong helpfulness, and chivalrous nobility, for which the warrior's life pursued under the stress of a high ideal gives a field and opportunities. How wonderful. Okay, this is how the Kshatriya discipline helps to flower in the flowering of the soul also. Again, I'll just read this. Means of self-development through the flowering of the soul in the qualities of courage, disciplined force, strong helpfulness, and chivalrous nobility. So it's such a beautiful way he explains all this here.
Even further in this chapter, I think says ahimsa till then is a ahimsa. He uses the word ahimsa is a chimera. I think.
Chimera. Again, another point he makes here, very important point. I'm just giving the highlights here. That the times of the Gita, or the the ideas of that society in which the Gita was written, they do not regard you as a social being, and their aim is not to fit you just in the social structure. This is a European idea. Indian philosophy regards you as a spiritual being. This is very important. ये मैं यहाँ पे पढ़ रहा हूँ इसको. Where that comes, स्वधर्मे निधनम श्रेयः paradharmo भयावह. It is, rather hang thyself than belong to the horde of successful imitators. This is the corresponding aphorism for that half a verse from the Gita. It is better to die following your Swadharma rather than to follow the dharma of somebody else like that. So the ancient civilization laid peculiar stress on the individual nature, tendency, temperament, and sought to determine by it the ethical type, function, and place in the society. Now see, nor did it consider man primarily as a social being or the fullness of his social existence as the highest ideal, but rather as a spiritual being, ये बहुत बड़ी problem होती है. When we are trapped by society in the name of duty, this, that, blah, blah. What about your contribution? I am not a social being in the first place. Society came later. The spirit was already self-existent. I am a spiritual being who has to, first of all, realize himself, like that. So nor did it consider man primarily as a social being or the fullness of his social existence as the highest ideal, but rather as a spiritual being in process of formation and development, and his social life, ethical law, play of temperament, and exercise of function as means and stages of spiritual formation. ये ये जो लास्ट टाइम भी हमने किया था कि यूरोपियन आइडियाज अबाउट ह्यूमैनिटेरियनिज्म, दिस दैट, वो सब, एंड सीइंग गीता फ्रॉम दैट स्टैंड पॉइंट इज रॉन्ग. It
Our
all comes from there.
perception will choose our goals.
Again, man is not considered primarily as a social being or the fullness of his social existence as the highest ideal, but rather as a spiritual being in process of formation and development, and his social life, ethical law, play of temperament, and exercise of function as means and stages of spiritual formation. So wonderful. और फिर यहाँ पे इन्होंने 4 वर्णास का दिया हुआ है, thought and knowledge, etc. This is not necessary. Now,
So Anmol bhai,
हाँ.
The section that you read before this, where you said that there was a segment of people that was given this opportunity to fight, and they exhibited these qualities. So what they are emphasizing is that the swabhava of a spiritual soul, you have to align up the person to take a responsibility on
according to his swabhava,
and that allows the spiritual flowering. Is that what they mean?
Yes. And nahi, that too, you have to align with your soul temperament and follow according to that. Second, what he's saying is, अच्छा मैं दोबारा पढ़ देता हूँ उसको, कि
please, because you read that quality, saying that person, a small segment was,
Just read this here, what I'm highlighting on the screen. Through the flowering of the soul in the qualities of courage, disciplined force, strong helpfulness, and chivalrous nobility. So when the warrior's life is followed according to, the dharma and all that, then it happens in the flowering of the soul through the increase of these qualities. That is what he's saying. So it is not entire, and he says that the service of the Kshatriya dharma, it cannot be denied in the how it has contributed to the growth of humanity. Basically what he's saying is he's contracting that tendency that only peace, koi ladai nahi hona chahiye, kuch nahi hona chahiye. No bhaiya, it is necessary. And that necessity, how it helps you to grow, even to grow spiritually. The contradiction basically that he's resolving here is that how can fighting make you more spiritual? That is what he's explaining here. That even fighting, that will make you more spiritual.
Correct. But the 4 qualities, what I was thinking at that time is that for parents who have children who are exhibiting a tendency towards these qualities should be encouraged to therefore take this as a path, because that will lead to their swadharma.
Exactly.
So this is their swabhava, those qualities that were referred in that line.
That is their swadharma, what they have to practice. Yeah.
Right. Thanks.
So yeah, now, I mean, in this chapter, basically the last sentence of it is like the summary. Not a physical asceticism, but an inner ascesis is the teaching of the Gita. After this, he starts taking up the Atma Vidya verses in the 2nd chapter. But again, this difference between sannyasa and tyaga. So he kind of summarizes this here before he ends this chapter. If we read this, then we will have to postpone the chanting of, because again, in the creed of the Aryan fighter, there is basically just 2 things. Okay. One is telling him the Atma Vidya, telling him about the self, and telling him that you need not have any grief on that account because the soul is imperishable and indestructible. The second idea that is given there in 5-6 verses is that even from the point of view of the Kshatriya dharma, okay, not from the spiritual point of view, even from the point of view of the Kshatriya dharma, it is your duty to fight and you will go to heaven. Hatova prapsasi swargam jitva va bhokshase mahim, etc. And if you will not fight, then people will laugh at you, they will mock you, etc. So that is from a lower standard. But he's basically convincing him by 2 arguments, of which from spiritual point of view, the more important is the first, where he tells that the soul is indestructible and all those things which he tells about the soul. Different examples he gives. Right. So I was thinking that I don't need to go through any of the text of the 7th chapter. I'll just recite those verses. Usse aapke mind mein wo summarize ho jayega, and those who want, they can read that chapter, the 7th one, before we do the next class on Monday. Is that okay?
Perfect, sir.
Right. So 8:48 right now. We have around 20 minutes. Isme actually, basically, he's just contrasting the ideal of sannyasa and tyaga. Yeah, maybe I'll just read this because we'll still have time for reciting around 20 verses. I'll just read this, then we'll recite those verses and close the session. Sannyasa because again, it's necessary for Indians. This idea of sannyasa, wo itna koot ke bhara hua hai. Most people, I'm saying, if they see themselves honestly, they take up spirituality, they think I should become a sannyasa. Most, I'm not saying all, or if not most, at least majority, right? So it has to be corrected, the error in that idea. Okay. Sannyasa is the renunciation of life and action on the threefold modes of nature, but it has to be approached through one or three. Isme basically he is giving how that approach into sannyasa happens. A very significant paragraph, so worth reading a little, slowly. Sannyasa is the renunciation of life and action and of the threefold modes of nature. It has to be approached through one or other of the three qualities in a very masterly way. Here Sri Aurobindo will show how the four things can be there. Tamogun, Sattvagun, Rajogun ka, how those four combinations will be there. Very beautiful, amazing. Mark this out as one of the things to be read later on. The impulse may be tamasic. ठीक है? The वैराग्य आया, मुझे spiritual life में जाना है, क्यों आ रहा है? Why do you want to take up spiritual life? Okay? A feeling of impotence, fear, aversion, disgust, horror of the world and life. One, tamasic. Or it may be the rajasic quality tending towards tamas. An impulse of weariness of the struggle, grief, disappointment, refusal to accept any longer this vain turmoil of activity with its pains and its eternal discontent. Or the impulse may be that of rajas tending towards sattva. The impulse to arrive at something superior to anything life can give, to conquer a higher state. Dekha, Rajoguna hai na? To trample down life itself under the feet of an inner strength, which seeks to break all bonds and transcend all limits. Basically, here he is giving here the motives of entry into the spiritual life or the spiritual seeking. Okay. Or the fourth one, it may be sattvic, an intellectual perception of the vanity of life and the absence of any real goal or justification for this ever cycling world existence, or else, अब वो फाइनल की बात करें जो गुणातीत है एक तरीके से, a spiritual perception, sorry, there were 5 not 4, a spiritual perception of the timeless, the infinite, the silent, the nameless and formless peace beyond. You feel that there is something like that, something akala, ananta, shashvata, etc. The recoil of Arjuna, very clear, is the tamasic recoil from action of the sattva rajasic man. He's a rajasic man who is governed by sattvic ideas, but the recoil is tamasic. There is fear, aversion, disgust, horror, all that is there. So it is the lowest of all.
At this stage, he has fallen into tamas. Mode of operation has become tamas.
Yes.
That is why.
Yes.
That's
why he says. That's why he says उसको नपुंसक बोलते हैं second chapter.
Cleave is the word.
क्लैब्यम मास्मगमः पार्थ नैतत्वय्युपपद्यते शुद्रम हृदय दौर्बल्यम त्यक्त्वोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप. This does not befit a hero like you. Give up this unmanliness. Look at him. He's calling him unmanly. He's calling him a napunsak. Cleave. उसको झकझोड़ रहे हैं. And anybody who will turn Krishna, towards the Bhagavan of the Gita, that, under say that shaking is done. He will pull you out of that tamas. And that Vishada, which was there, jo first chapter vagara mein aata hai, it may be a necessary stepping point, but then, he wakes you up. What are you doing? Come on, get up, fight. Like that.
Chabuk mari ekdam barabar.
Exactly. Very powerful. You read that verse, you hit very strongly. Klaibyam masmagamah partha. Naitatvayupapadyate. Right? Maybe we'll chant that. So, the teacher may confirm it in its direction. Again, very important point he's making here. Using it as a dark entry to the purity and peace of the ascetic life. Or he may purify it at once and raise it towards the rare altitudes of the sattvic tendency of renunciation. In fact, he does neither. He discourages the tamasic recoil and the tendency to renunciation and enjoins matlab us pe enforce karna, the continuance of action and even of the same fierce and terrible action, ghoram karma. But he points the disciple towards another and inner renunciation, which is the real issue from his crisis and the way towards the soul's superiority to the world nature and yet its calm and self-possessed action in the world. Amazing sentence. I mean, very long, but amazing sentence. He discourages the tamasic recoil and the tendency, blah, blah, but he points the disciple towards another and inner renunciation, which is the real issue. Issue माने उससे क्या outcome निकलने वाला है. Real issue from his crisis and the way towards the soul's soul's superiority to the world nature. It is that which we have to realize. We essentially are superior to this Prakriti, to this world nature, and yet it's calm and self-possessed action in the world, not a physical asceticism, not sannyasa, but an inner ascesis, tyaga, and the tapasya to be in that state of detachment. That is the teaching of the Gita. Very
But
clear.
Anmol bhai, how is it superior? He makes a statement
Superior,
saying that
soul
the
superiority to
spirit
the
is.
world nature, वो कह रहे हैं.
He's
How is
saying the
what
spirit
superior?
is
How is
superior.
inner renunciation superior, you're asking?
You just now read that line. He said the soul is superior. Just read that line. He's saying that you have to come to this point because it is superior. He's saying it is superior to. Just read that line, what you just repeated.
He
You
points the
ended.
disciple towards another and inner renunciation, which is the real issue from his crisis, and the way towards the soul's superiority to the world nature. What he's saying is the gunatita avastha. World nature
But
means
how
the
is it
three
superior?
gunas. Why is it superior, Mane? It is free. It is not subject to the action of the gunas. It is not bound. That is why.
World
But,
nature is
just,
Prakriti,
just,
no?
It is a
just.
higher consciousness. It is looking at things from a more complete perspective.
And Anmol by
So,
world
right,
nature
right. But the
is
point I'm trying
Prakriti.
to make is
हाँ
that
बोलिए.
when he said the warfare, when
हाँ.
you have got your opponents in front, you have to station yourself there, but still work through the gunas, na?
You
How
won't work
you
through
have
the
to still
gunas.
pick up
If
the
you are, no,
weapons
no,
and
no.
fight.
If you are, so the gunas are transformed. So they don't remain the gunas. So the tamas, rajas, and sattva, they no longer remain tamas, rajas, and sattva in the transformed consciousness. When you are seated in that higher consciousness, they become jyotihi, tapas, and shama. So you are perfectly quiet. You are having that full effective force running through you, and you are having the perfect clarity. What you are doing. The action of the gunas is not there. You are working from a higher consciousness. You're working from the divine nature.
Right. So the mode of operations get transformed.
Totally
That
transformed.
is why it's superior.
Exactly.
Right.
तो
Right.
वो गुना
Makes
बचे ही
sense.
नहीं ना. The gunas have been transformed. Tamas, rajas, sattva खत्म हो गया है. Tamas has been replaced by shama. Rajas has been replaced by tapas, pure chit shakti, and sattva has been, satya is basically a half light, half darkness. You're groping because it is mental. That has transformed. That has been replaced by jyotihi, which is the full supramental illumination. You are having the total knowledge and clarity as to why you are doing what you are doing, how to do it, etc., etc.
So Anmol bhai,
Right. Right.
this
Thanks.
particular world nature is Prakriti here.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Is the lower
Yeah. Yeah.
apara Prakriti.
Yeah. Yeah.
And soul superiority, when you just said integral yoga talks about this, no? The transformation of the
Soul
gunas.
superiority to the world nature is talked about by everybody
No,
because they ask you to get the liberation in the soul.
हाँ
हाँ, आप क्या
करेक्ट.
बोल रहे हैं?
मैं कहना ये चाह रहा हूँ वो बराबर है soul superiority because you are acting from that state,
What is your
Brahmi sthiti
question?
or whatever. The question is the transformation of the gunas is a contribution of integral yoga.
Correct.
It is
Correct.
not
Correct.
mentioned in
Yeah, it
Gita.
is not. They don't bother with transformation. Their object is to leave the
हाँ
world and to have a liberated state somewhere.
तो यहाँ ये difference समझना जरूरी है कि गीता is not giving this answer. Sri Aurobindo is giving this answer.
Gita is giving not this answer in a very clear way. It hints at it. It says madbhavam agataha. They have become like me. Madbhavam means my nature. Okay. So my nature is the para prakriti. And that is the higher conscious, matlab, the divine mother wala stiti. So if
पर
you're stationed in the para prakriti, that means you're above the gunas. And yet
पर
you are
वो
being asked to act. So indirectly it is there in the Gita, but expressly the transformation of the gunas वगैरह उसका elaboration इसके अंदर नहीं है. In the
हाँ मैं
Gita you
वही
are basically said to go गुणातीत. आपको
गुणातीत
beyond जाना.
exactly. I was about to tell that only कि वो वहां रुक जाती है.
Yeah. So that's what
Integral
I'm saying.
yoga.
The Gita, when the Gita was written, even this must have been very revolutionary. And take it as a, आप realistically देखो, is the Gita even implemented in day-to-day life by any human being?
नहीं भाई
Hardly
वो
any.
तो hardly any.
Most people, the idea of spirituality is actually some kind of a sattvic life. They
Yes.
don't not even aware that Gunatita is the real thing that has to be aimed at.
For
Honestly,
Gita,
if you see.
हाँ सही बोल रहे. No, common people means you have to become a saint.
Exactly.
You can't even
Exactly.
fight a war.
Exactly.
कुछ नहीं.
So it's like 8:58 right now. In around 10 minutes, maybe I think.
Anmol, I would like to put one point in one
Please,
sentence.
please.
Since you spoke about Buddhism and Jainism,
Yes.
like, they teach you renunciation and, त्याग के चले जाओ. And chivalrous की लिखा है यहाँ पर कि how you have to be fight for your duties, it is your dharma के लिए. अपना लड़ने का, understand my point?
Yes.
So I think Sikhism has always
Ah,
gone through all
correct,
this.
correct,
Whatever
correct.
I listen about Aurobindo,
Yes,
whatever you people talk about,
yes.
I think this always comes to my mind कि
Sikhism,
गुरु ग्रंथ साहब में ये सब कुछ वैसे ही
absolutely,
लिखा हुआ है.
absolutely. Sikhism, for example, forbids sannyasa.
Yes.
Sikhism does not allow sannyasa.
Yes, वो
Sikhism has
कहते
that
हैं
concept of fighting for the divine,
fight.
to that
Yes,
idea of
fighting.
Khalsa. In
हाँ,
fact, I'll tell you what, in the
जीते ही
foundations of Indian culture, now retitled as Renaissance in India and other essays on Indian culture, Shri Aurobindo खालसा के बारे में, Sikhism के बारे में 2-3 चीजें लिखी है, and he says it was too much far ahead of its time, and that is why it could not become more widespread. But he appreciates it greatly, and he says
like
it was ahead of its time.
like Guru Gobind Singh, he fought
Yes,
for
absolutely.
his
That's
dharma.
मेरे को भी actually मालूम नहीं था. Some only Sikh person told me this, and I was
हाँ.
very impressed कि Sikhism forbids sannyasa that way.
Of course, it's forbids. वो कहते हैं जीते जी जीवन में
Exactly,
रहते हुए ही
exactly,
अपने को
exactly.
मुक्त
गीता
करना है.
गीता forbid expressly नहीं करती है. It permits it, but it permits it for the person for whom it has become an inner necessity. Like
Yes,
all the
and
good things which have happened because of Buddha, all the great things
हाँ,
which have happened because of Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, they would not happen
yes,
if they were confined to that, rigmarole of earthly life, worldly life, which, वो समाज उनको उसमें
हाँ,
फंसा के रखता था. So that's
हाँ.
why the Gita allows for that.
And at the same time, Sikhism also what you call condemns. I hope I'm using the right word for that. Karam Kand, जिससे
हाँ.
कृतियां आ गई थी
Gita
हिंदुइज्म
also
में.
condemns. Gita
Yes,
also condemns.
yes,
Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschitah
हाँ,
vedavadarataः partha nanyadastīti vadinah कामात्मानः स्वर्गपरा जन्म कर्म फलप्रदां क्रिया विशेष बहुलां भोगैश्वर्य गतिं प्रति भोगैश्वर्य प्रसक्तानां तया पहृत चेतसां व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिः समाधौ न विधीयते. विद दिस काइंड ऑफ थिंकिंग, ये कर्मकांड करके करना, आपको कभी समाधि की प्राप्ति नहीं होगी. You will never have
exactly.
that inner stability, is what
This
the
is
Gita says
exactly what is
expressly.
written.
तो ये
Yes,
जो इसका कंडेमनेशन है कर्मकांड वगैरह का, इट इज एक्सप्लिसिट, एंड वो
yeah.
दिस फ्लावरी वर्ड ऑफ द वेदा, फिर बाद में गीता अपने आप को वो इट फ्लोज लाइक
And
दैट.
I think it is because of the supremacy of Brahmanas, Brahmins in the
देखिए,
society.
Brahmins have the contribution. They are the
हाँ,
ones who have
but
protected the
yes,
knowledge in the world.
exactly.
Under
But
the stress of the invasions, Brahmins have given up their life. They've ran away with shivlings. They've ran away with deities, and their dedication to the protection of knowledge, it is undeniable, and nobody can मतलब उसको
but
respect करना
because
चाहिए हाथ जोड़ के.
but
But
because
again, all the varnas, they become corrupt. कुछ ना कुछ corruption हर वर्ण के अंदर
exactly,
आता
this
है.
is what I'm going to say.
So the
Yes,
Kshatriya becomes a tyrant, the Vaishya becomes a banya, the Shudra
yeah.
becomes a, फिर वो trade union बना के नाटक करेंगे सारा वारा. तो all that is there. Anyway, somebody chat में कुछ डाला है, but we'll just chant those verses now. Yeah. Okay. So 9-2 already. I think in the remaining time, what we should do is जो main verses थे आत्मा विद्या वाले, they are beginning from 2.11. Shall we chant them?
Please.
Just
I'll
one
show
quick
them on the
question.
screen. Okay.
One quick question. Is there a hint of supermind in Sikhism?
That I don't know. That is
Even I don't. Supermind, उसमें पूरे गुरु ग्रंथ साहब मन की बात की है. मन गुरु
that
ग्रंथ
I don't
साहब
know.
में अपना मन means, I think I was contemplating the other day also. I don't know कैसे हो रहा था बात. तो मुझे लगता है जो मन, and also you said a psychic being is in the हृदय गुहा. That's what you said.
Yes,
We've been
yes,
discussing this.
yes, yes.
And behind the heart, it's a subtle thing. It's not physical that you can, that's we've been discussing all through. I think, and maybe the meaning is, maybe they say it differently, but the meaning is exactly the same, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. So how should I size this so that everybody can see? See, the thing is, if I put this on the screen, people cannot see the English in the same screen. One
Do
second.
we
one
need
second.
to see the English?
Yeah, I think Sanskrit should be good.
Sanskrit should be good. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just chant from here till 2.38, and next time we will begin from 2.39 and Sankhya and Yoga. Is that okay?
Perfect, perfect.
Okay, okay. So those who want to chant can chant along. Otherwise, those who just want to listen can just listen to, me reciting this. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
Uvacha.
अशोच्यानन्वशोचस्त्वं प्रज्ञावादांश्च भाषसे गतासूनगतासूंश्च नानुशोचन्ति पंडिताः. नत्वेवाहं जातु नासं नत्वं नेमे जनाधिपाः न चैव न भविष्यामः सर्वे वयम् अतः परम् देहिनोऽस्मिन् यथा देहे कौमारं यौवनं जरा तथा देहांतर प्राप्तिः धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यति मात्रा स्पर्शास्तु कौन्तेय शीतोष्ण सुख दुःखदाः आगमापायिनो नित्याः तान् स्थितिक्षस्व भारत यं हि न व्यथयन्त्येते पुरुषं पुरुषर्षभ समदुःख सुखं धीरं सो अमृतत्वाय कल्पते नासतो विद्यते भावो ना भावो विद्यते सतः उभयोरपि दृष्टोऽन्तः त्वनयोस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः अविनाशि तु तद्विद्धि येन सर्वम् इदं ततं विनाशमव्ययस्यास्य न कश्चित् कर्तुमर्हति अन्तवन्त इमे देहाः नित्यस्योक्ताः शरीरिणः अनाशिनो अप्रमेयस्य तस्मात् युध्यस्व भारत य एनं वेत्ति हन्तारं यश्चैनं मन्यते हतम् उभौ तौ न विजानीतो नायं हन्ति न हन्यते न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे वेदा विनाशिनं नित्यं य एनमजमव्ययम् कथं स पुरुषः पार्थ कं घातयति हन्तिकम् वासांसि जीर्णानि यथा विहाय नवानि गृह्णाति नरोपराणि तथा शरीराणि विहाय जीर्णानि अन्यानि संयाति नवानि देहि नैनं छिन्दन्ति शस्त्राणि नैनं दहति पावकः न चैनं क्लेदयन्त्यापो न शोषयति मारुतः अच्छेद्योऽयम् अदाह्योऽयम् अक्लेद्यो अशोष्य एव च नित्यः सर्वगतः स्थाणुः अचलोऽयं सनातनः अव्यक्तोऽयम् अचिन्त्योऽयम् अविकार्योऽयमुच्यते तस्माद् एवं विदित्वैनं नानुशोचितुम् अर्हसि अथ चैनं नित्यजातं नित्यं वा मन्यसेऽमृतं तथापि त्वं महाबाहो नैवं शोचितुमर्हसि जातस्य हि ध्रुवो मृत्युः ध्रुवं जन्म मृतस्य च तस्माद् अपरिहार्येऽर्थे न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि अव्यक्तादीनि भूतानि व्यक्तमध्यानि भारत अव्यक्तनिधनान्येव तत्र का परिदेवना आश्चर्यवत् पश्यति कश्चिदेनम् आश्चर्यवत् वदति तथैव चान्यः आश्चर्यवच्चैनमन्यः शृणोति श्रुत्वाप्येनं वेद न चैव कश्चित् देहि नित्यम् अवध्योऽयं देहे सर्वस्य भारत तस्मात् सर्वाणि भूतानि न त्वं शोचितुम् अर्हसि स्वधर्मम् अपि चावेक्ष्य न विकम्पितुमर्हसि धर्म्याद्धियुद्धात् श्रेयोऽन्यत् क्षत्रियस्य न विद्यते यदृच्छया चोपपन्नं स्वर्गद्वारमपावृतं सुखिनः क्षत्रियाः पार्थ लभन्ते युद्धमीदृशम् अथ चेत्त्वम् इमं धर्म्यं संग्रामं न करिष्यसि ततः स्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च हित्वा पापम् अवाप्स्यसि अकीर्तिं चापि भूतानि कथयिष्यन्ति ते व्ययां संभावितस्य च कीर्तिः मरणाद् अतिरिच्यते भयाद्रणाद् उपरतं मन्स्यन्ते त्वां महारथाः येषां च त्वं बहुमतो भूत्वा यास्यसि लाघवम् अवाच्यवादांश्च बहून् वदिष्यन्ति तवाहिताः निन्दन्तस्तव सामर्थ्यं ततो दुःखतरं नु किम् हतो वा प्राप्स्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महीम् तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः सुख दुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापम् अवाप्स्यसि।